It's New Year's Eve. I just did the 24-hour readathon and I thought, let's do the book tag now that I've officially finished every book I'm going to read for this year. So I have my list queued up here. This is the list that Larry Reads did, and I believe Destiny Sidwell started this. There's a couple ones that I'm skipping just because I'm either going to address it in another video or I just don't think it's relevant right now. To be honest with you guys, this is gonna be so interesting just because I feel like I haven't remembered a lot of the books that I read this year. I just remember the vibes. So that's what we're gonna go with. It's fine. So first up we have most disappointing book of the year. I decided to go with Darling Venom. This is a book that has been on my TBR for years, and booktubers that I really love have loved the book, and it just didn't hit for me. It's kind of emotional and it is kind of hard to really give details just because I wouldn't want to spoil it, but there are brothers and something tragic happens and then there's enemies sort of thing going on, but it doesn't really last very long. And the book is also like 200 pages too long. I feel like, yes, we need to develop certain things, certain growth, but I remember just feeling like it dragged on for way too long. So then we have a underdog book, and this is Dear Anna by IIE. I believe it could be a pseudonym or it could just be the initials of the author's real name. But this was a book that I just found on TikTok. I saw the quotes and I was really interested to see what was really going on. I read it on a whim in college and I hadn't really been reading that much, so it was kind of nice to just try something out. And 4.75. It was so good, and it follows this girl who has basically dealt with a life-altering accident and somebody offers up their kidney, I believe. And so she's like paying respects to the girl. She's never met the girl who gave up the kidney, but she pays respects to the girl, and there's a guy who's also there at the cemetery and they have a little romance, and it's so good but also so heartbreaking. Like the ending was so sad. I would definitely recommend it though. It's definitely giving like Boys of Tommen style, very heartbreaking. Or if you know the book Home by Trinity Lem, that's another really like, nobody really knows about it, but it is kind of like that. And I just tend to really like stories where everybody's sad, there's a lot of sad stuff going on, but there's a little bit of mending that happens by the end. And I feel like that's what this was. Well written, I flew through it, and I wasn't really reading at the time. I was really in a slump, so this is one that I would absolutely recommend. Then we have What Was an Overhyped Book You Read? And this is gonna be so unpopular, guys, just hear me out. But I'm putting A Man Called Ove just because I still gave it 4 stars, I still liked it, but just thinking about overhyped books and looking at the list of books I read this year, the ones that I didn't like, they weren't overhyped, they were just, you know, normal. And then the other ones, they were hyped up and I loved them. So the only one that I was like slightly disappointed was A Man Called Ove, just because I was hearing all this stuff about how I would cry so hard and how it was the most emotional book in the world. And if I don't cry really hard at any piece of media that somebody says I will, I've noticed that I tend to be like I don't know if I can really give it its 5 stars, its flowers. But even with this one, I think that it was good. The writing was a little different than I had expected, and it was a little weirder than I'm used to. So I think that's the main reason. And it just felt like there were a lot of unnecessary details that they were necessary near the end, but I just wasn't really clicking with them in the moment. So that's why I only gave it 4, but 4 is still high for me. Then we have a book that surprised you, and I went with Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl by Joy Goffney. And I shouldn't have been surprised because I read Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry by her, and I remember giving that like a 4.75 just like I did with this one. But it was just a different type of book, and it's also a book that I feel like resonates so much with me, and I don't think another book has really done that to this extent, except for one exception this year. So that was really great. So far, these are books from just a couple hours ago in my 24-hour readathon. So it's kind of fun that I actually got to do that and regain the reading hype and the reading momentum. But this is one of those books. It's basically about religion and sex education and just like rules and how the church kind of operates, and just how a family with a pastor and a pastor's daughter and the pressure of everything, like it's just all of those little pieces, and really, really good just discussions. Characters were all really good. They jumped off the page, and I didn't expect to just have such a fun time and feel like the Black culture elements were so great and so just easy, seamless. They felt like I was relating to stuff. So I really liked all of that. I would absolutely recommend this one. And I just think she's an author that could become a favorite. She's only done 3 books. I haven't read her 3rd book, but I could see her becoming a favorite for sure. Then we have your favorite book couples of the year. So I'm going with Magnolia and BJ. They've always been a favorite for me, but they were in the release from this year, Magnolia Parks Into the Dark, and it was just a good, it was just a good ending. Made me cry really hard because that's it from them. I definitely want to reread their books and just go crazy, do some more annotating. It's just a heart-wrenching series and I love it so much. But I also have to go with Jacob and Brianna from Yours Truly, because that was another absolutely favorite rom-com of the year. I'm planning on rereading it because I read it in the beginning of the year and I already feel like I forgot things. And then I heard all these great things about Just for the Summer, which is another book in this series. So I want to read them together either next month or February. We'll see how I'm feeling. But that couple was really, really good, just because to see how Jacob has anxiety and it's handled in such a great way with Brianna is just so heartwarming, and you don't get a lot of those types of rom-coms at all, especially with the anxiety representation. So I really loved that execution, and I just think that's a series that I will want to continue. Favorite main characters, I have to go with Monique from Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl, just because I was looking at the list of books I've read, and normally I don't feel that strongly about the main character, or I just don't like them. So with Monique, I really liked her because I could relate to her, and I feel like her friends that were in her circle kind of acted the same way that my friends do, with like a little bit of judgment, but a little bit of like they want you to come out of your shell and do more rebellious things, and like she's like hesitant. She grew up in a more conservative household, and so I feel like that was really relatable, and she's just a character that, I don't know, it felt like I was her in parts, and just the way that she handled things, and I love how that jumped off the page. Then we have new favorite author you discovered this year. That has to be Kristen Hanna, hands down. It was such a good year in terms of those books, and I've only read 3 of her books: Firefly Lane, Nightingale, and Fly Away, which is the sequel to Firefly Lane. And they were life-changing. Not as much Fly Away because it's connected to Firefly Lane, but the other 2, both 5 stars, my top 2 reads of the year. Just excellent, excellent books that I genuinely feel like everybody should read, especially if you're a woman, because of the way that she portrays different types of women and their strength, their resilience, just the emotions that come with every little aspect of life, and just so good. The writing was great. And another thing with her is that she writes historical fiction, and I don't normally gravitate towards it, but with her, I literally fell in love. I loved it, and I want to read basically all of her books next year. That's definitely a 2025 TBR thing. Author that didn't work out for you this year, I'm just gonna have to go with S.T. Abby, who wrote the Mind F series. It's supposed to be this like really crazy, like psychological, like dark romance thing where she's a serial killer and then her boyfriend is hunting serial killers and is looking for her specifically, but she covers her tracks really well. And the concept is good, but I just remember being bored, and this is very unpopular, but I remember being bored for the majority of the little novellas, I just kind of rushed through them because I wasn't really feeling that vibe. I think dark romance just normally really isn't my thing, so that's not really on St. Abbey. I think that's just on my personal taste. Then we have the happiest book you read this year, and I was looking through all the books I've read and I realized I just read really dark or sad books. I think that's my vibe, just because I like to feel something. But I decided to go with another readathon book I literally just read a couple hours ago, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. It's just a cute little graphic novel, and it's a retelling of Little Women, which is one of my favorite classics and my favorite movie of all time. So I really loved it. It's very modern, very different, still sad in parts, but overall a feel-good experience with all the sisters, and happy ending for the sake of these characters because it's a middle grade retelling. So I understand all the changes that were made, and that made it really cute and fun. In terms of the saddest books I read this year, I have to go with, there's a lot, but I think I'm gonna go with Taming Seven, just because there's a lot of trauma with Gibbsy, which I didn't really realize reading the other books in the Boys of Tommen series. So this was the first one with him and Claire, their first like couple book. It's supposed to be a standalone, but I'm hearing rumors that there might be a sequel, which is very much needed because it was all kind of abrupt. We need more of a conclusion for them. But this was really sad just because he's dealt with a lot. I'm not going to get into it, but if you know Boys of Tommen, all the books are really sad and emotional. They all go through different things in their lives. So seeing it with him and seeing like the horrors that he's been through is just awful. So I was really emotional reading it. I don't remember crying, but it was an emotional read and had a lot of mixed reviews because there were some things that didn't really feel satisfying for Gibbsy and Claire, but as a book, I gave it 5. I don't know if I would give it 5 if I reread it, but Boys of Tommen is a 5-star series for me, so I think I just naturally want to just click the 5 stars for any book written by Chloe Walsh in the series. Then we have another readathon book for the most frustrating book you read this year, and I'm going with My Dark Vanessa. And this is a book that I actually decided not to read just because there's so much that goes into the writing, the style, the plot, the premise, and I felt like it was too loaded for me to be like, ooh, this was a horrible book or this was a great book, because I felt icky the whole time, and that's what she was trying to accomplish, and I think she did a great job. But it was also just like, can I put it among my 5-star reads? I'm gonna reflect on it, think about it. It's possible, but right now I'm like I would recommend it, but I also wouldn't. It's basically a teacher-student relationship story, but really exposing like the horrors of it and just how it can really warp the minds of the people who are victims in the situation. So it was very like icky the whole time, but I also enjoyed it just because how realistic and raw it was, and it felt like the author really did her research. So I liked that. It's just like, it frustrated me because it was so icky and gross. Then for the best book adaptation of the year, I'm going to go with book adaptation that I've watched, even if it hasn't come out this year. And so I'm going with Gone Girl. I read the book for the first time this year and loved it. It's so good, so like captivating. And the movie was absolutely spot on. All the changes that they made were so deliberate, so right. They felt like people were really looking at the subject matter and going with what the author wrote, partly maybe because the author was a part of the process, but sometimes the author is a part of the process and changes a lot. For this story, they did a great job. The actors were great. It felt just as icky, even more icky in some scenes than I remembered when I was reading the book, but it came to life really great. I'm skipping favorite covers of the year just because I haven't really bought, well, maybe Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which was also a great book, But I remember liking the different alternative Barnes & Noble covers as well as the actual one. And the cover for the third book is beautiful. I'm so excited for it. It's like a really good fantasy trilogy for me, especially because it's not too hard to get into the lore and understand what's going on. So I'm happy about that. I can't stop moving around and rearranging my position, so sorry about that. But now we have a book you haven't stopped thinking about, and like I was talking about earlier, Firefly Lane is definitely that book. I think about it constantly, every single day. I watched the show adaptation and it was fine, it was okay, but definitely the book changed my life. I read it in one sitting in this bed right before I left for college and sobbed my eyes out, and it was just such a good depiction of female friendships and all the things that can happen and how a bond can last forever in spite of everything that happens around you. So absolutely recommend her. I think I would start with that book. People would probably say The Nightingale, maybe that one, but the friendship aspect of this one was so strong that I just feel a close connection to it for sure. Then we have Unpopular Book You Loved, and I'm gonna go with The Teacher by Freida McFadden. Freida McFadden is another author I really liked this year, but she has some like ups and downs in a couple of her books, just a couple so far. The Teacher is not one of them, even though the rating is fairly low on Goodreads, but it's basically similar to My Dark Vanessa. Not as graphic, so I guess that's why I gave it a rating, but I gave it 4.5 just because it was very fast paced and the ending was just jaw-dropping. I didn't even understand how that managed to not get found out throughout the book, but all those little things throughout the book were crazy, out of pocket, and just insane, but that's what makes it so good. And I think it's unpopular because people feel uncomfortable. I, however, was uncomfortable but enjoyed it. I don't know how to explain that, but that's just how I'm feeling. Then we have the book with the most unique concept you've read this year, and I decided to go with Where Sleeping Girls Lie. And this is a book where she's at a boarding school and there's secrets and all the stuff about people disappearing, what happened. And what I've noticed with this author, I don't want to mispronounce her name, but what I've noticed about this author, she's written Ace of Spades. She always comments on something in society, in real life, that's just really not talked about, and elevates it, makes it more extreme in the book to make it feel more disgusting. And that's what I like about this one. I really enjoy this. I don't remember all the details, but I remember really loving it. I read it at the beginning of the year, and I think she could also become another favorite author just because of how she lets everything unfold. And it's always something where you're like, this happens in real life, and it's basically as extreme as she's making it, but she's making it more clear to the readers that it's just crazy. So we already have book you read this year that you would want to reread, and I was saying Yours Truly for sure. But then book you wish you got to this year. There's a lot. I had a long TBR list, but I think I'm gonna go with Caught Up, which is the third book in the Windy City series, and it's by Liz Tomford. Mile High and The Right Move especially have been really popular, and I've heard great things about the other two, especially the fourth one. So maybe it's like every even book she makes is gonna be like a major hit. But I feel like the longer I wait, the more I'm like, because her books start off slow, so I think that's what's holding me back. Maybe that's a book I should have read in the readathon because I had so much time on my hands, but it was really fun to do that readathon. I think I would definitely do it next year just to get a couple of books in at the last minute. Caught Up is definitely a book that I wish I got to this year, as well as just other series that I wanted to start or just finish. So that's definitely another goal. That is all for the tag. The rest of those are just like 2025 goals, and I'm gonna make a 2025 goal video. So this is just gonna be the little end of the little tag, and I'm going to do other videos for the end of the year. So stay tuned for those, and I will see you guys next time. Like and subscribe. Bye.